Hello, Saltines. Thank you so much for joining me this week. I well, we're going to talk about some cool stuff on this episode. um, but before I can get into the educational piece of this episode, I need to share a little bit of bad news. Those of you who are regular listeners will recall that a couple weeks back we asked those of you listeners, viewers, however you may connect with us, right? We asked you to go on to the last episode that we recorded and to comment something to the effect of save Austin, free Austin, help Austin, and so many of you were so good to do that. Um, Sadly, we didn't get enough of those comments or likes and shares. And yes, I'm holding you hostage here a little bit emotionally. Um, we didn't get enough of a response from you to encourage the people who had abducted Austin and were holding him hostage to or for ransom to release him. And I'm not blaming you for that because really the final say, the final decision in Austin's freedom really was mine. In looking at the pros and cons of the situation and based on the communication I was getting from his abductors, I made the decision to actually just let them keep him, and I'm going to wait maybe a few weeks, and if there's no further word or Austin doesn't pop up somewhere in some random place, right, that I'm just going to go ahead and take the insurance money. And with that money, I will plan on purchasing some better equipment for the podcast for you so that in future I don't look quite so grainy and washed out, and our audio and yeah, well, everything will just be better. So that would be an interesting thing. Those of you who join us regularly for the podcast, maybe that's a good question, and feel free to answer this week if you have a moment. But um, do we want Austin back? I don't think it's too late. Like the people who have abducted him, I think are still willing to negotiate. But do we want Austin back, or would you rather we provide you with a sleeker, more high tech program? I'd be very curious to hear some of those responses to those questions. Anyway, our episode today is going to be, again, as I mentioned at the beginning, kind of a fun one. We're going to talk about some fun stuff. The first thing that I want to go into is it wasn't really a listener or a saltine question. It was a question that came in from a student at the shop in response to one of the classes that we taught recently. And the line of the question really basically was, you know, is it okay? Is it acceptable? Is it a good idea to incorporate technology into contemporary spell work? And I wanted to talk about that a little bit because there are actually people out there who specialize in this. Like they call it technomancy, or people who will regularly incorporate modern science technology into their magical workings and their rituals. And so, in talking about that a little bit, I want to say that incorporating something like an internet program, an app, AI, whatever it may be, right, or even just devices like modern types of devices that obviously wouldn't have existed for our magical ancestors, that bringing those things into your spell work is absolutely okay. And as we evolve technologically as a being, humanity, right? As we do that, as we evolve, we actually need to continue to bring new things into our practice. We need to incorporate the new stuff. Um, there are many things, if you've done any research at all, you'll see in very old practices, like those that we have record of. There are things involved in those practices or incorporated in those rites and those spells that don't even exist anymore. And we've had to adapt and learn how to continue to do those things without whatever that item would have been, right? So we've always been doing this. We've always evolved. We've always incorporated the new technology, the new science, whatever it is, into our magical work, and that's really the only way that we can continue to function as magical practitioners. So don't be afraid to include technology in your spiritual or magical work. Do a little bit of research and be mindful of some of the other energies that you're working with in or working within tandem with whatever technology device, whatever you're bringing into that working. I say that because we've had a number of situations here at the shop where we've been doing a public ritual rite of some sort, or we've been focusing our effort into a spell. And we've had a lot of people. The coven has been there. We've had members of the community come in, students come in, and we've all been working together to focus whatever kind of energy. And in response to some of that, the spiritual, the etheric energy that's raised, we've actually had people's like cell phones die, like their batteries have been drained. One gentleman recently, and very unfortunately, actually, like his phone just died, like it just stopped working. And I think if I remember correctly, I think he had to get a new phone. So do consider that. Okay. But I think that you can appreciate it if you think about it, that something like magical energy, spiritual energy, really, when we look at what we're kind of understanding a bit more about just energy in general, right, is that it's not that big a leap, say, from like an electric signal to like a magical force, right? Like not too much of a stretch, right? Um, so I wanted to talk about that a little bit. And I also, and talking about that, maybe another comparison to make. Not that you need one because you're brilliant people and you understand. As usual, this is just me rambling. But it's not too far to, again, to kind of make the leap between something like AI technology that we would maybe incorporate into a working in some capacity, um, and say something like a servitor, right, where we've programmed that thought form, that servitor to kind of perform just a very basic function or just one particular function for us, right? Not that different, not that different. So again, so don't be afraid to do this, right? And be creative, be imaginative. And if you have anything that you do where you're like, I already kind of do this, and this is what I do, send us a note and let us know. I would love to see that, because we get comments and questions and things that come in from you guys a lot. And like, you're teaching us, like, we've had more than one situation where somebody has contacted us and they've been relating an experience or a story. And we're like, oh my God, I never would have thought to do that. Right. And so we're all kind of helping each other level up. It's a really good thing. Um, Yay. All right. So beyond that, I want to talk about like kind of our topic of focus tonight, which is really going to be how to put this simply. Basically, I want to say best or better practices for evocation in ritual or spell work. Okay. I want to talk about this because we recently did another public ritual at the shop, and we had a guest person centering that ritual. Usually Austin and I, if there's a ritual happening at the shop, it's usually Austin or I, or maybe Wendy, who's been on the podcast. It's been a really long time, but we usually have people that would be considered kind of elders within our coven leading those rituals or those public spells, those workings. But we decided to kind of like, oh, let's give this person a chance. Let's see how they do, right? And I want to be really clear, because I think this person does listen to the podcast. There was nothing wrong with the ritual that you did, nothing at all. Um, and I think, as it was from the, to my recollection, one of the first public rituals you've done, I think you did an amazing job. Um, I know that there are sometimes misunderstandings, or there can be confusion around particular pieces of ritual work. And the one, again, I really want to talk about tonight is the evocation process, the evocation piece, calling in our spirits and other intelligences. Because I think that was one thing that popped up in that working that maybe could have been a little better done. Okay. Anyway. Okay. So no shame, no shame. Don't worry about it. Doing great. Right. You're good. Okay. But in talking about that, though, I want to lay out just a few, I think, like best practices for that. Okay. And bearing in mind that every tradition and every practice will, of course, differ. If you have a means of evocation that you utilize in your spiritual work that is working for you, wonderful, stick to it. Right. But I think it's always good to maybe consider trying something else, right? Because who knows, maybe the new thing that we've never done before will actually work even better for us, right? So I want to talk about that, though, because again, there's confusion when we are doing evocation. I think that it's good to actually to start to consider what the process of that looks like. Days, sometimes, I mean, if you're someone that tends to more last minute something, like hours prior to the actual rite, then that serves two purposes. Okay. One, it makes sure that we are going over just the logistics of the ritual, like so we've got that down a bit, or we're more prepared, right? It helps us to I think, continue to keep the focus for the purpose of the ritual, but it also, through the process of thinking about that ritual and the evocation, the spiritual energies and intelligences that we want to call in, it also helps to kind of attune us to those energies. If you want to effectively call a particular spirit forward, and again, I'm talking primarily non-human spirits, different types of discarnates, deities. If you want to call those spirits in, particularly if you've not had a chance to kind of work with them a lot, there hasn't really already been some sort of connection or establishment there, if you want to call those spirits in successfully, one of the best ways to set yourself up for that is to actually start to attune to that energy early on, even before you show up for ritual. By doing that, what in essence what you're doing is not only are you working and focusing the self, but you are sending kind of a little bit of a signal up and out to potentially that spirit, so that when the time comes to gather for ritual, like they're already in the room, like they're like, I'm here, right? So I think that's a good thing to start with. Okay, as time gets nearer to the ritual, depending on any processes you already have in place in your practice or any you want to create for yourself, we also need to make sure that we need to take care of physical preparation. And I'm not even talking about the ritual itself. I think that when we talk about, or the concept of or conversation of evocation and like formal calling in of spirits, or more formalized calling in of spirits, when that conversation comes up, a lot of people, I think, forget or maybe never learned or realized that everything is a part of the evocation. It's not just the words you speak. It's how you stand, the way you position your body, the tone of your voice, the thought moving through your mind as you speak the word, your intent, right? Even the physical actions that you've made that day leading up to that ritual, those are all actually part of the evocation, because those are all in essence, even in unconscious ways you're not aware of, those are all things that are leading us up to be in the perfect space, like, or the most ideal space that we can be in when we actually utter the evocation, right? So it all kind of builds, and connects in some way. The challenge that I see with a lot of people is that when they go into a ritual working, right, when they're doing something where they need to evoke a spirit or another intelligence, right, that they don't really put a lot of thought into that beforehand, other than just the decision, like, oh, I want to call this goddess in because she does this, right? And that's kind of the extent, right? And that's good. There's nothing wrong with that. If anything, that's a good indication that that person's done some research. This is one of the other reasons why you need to learn about the spirits and the deities that you want to call in. You need to read their stories. You need to be familiar with them on even just an academic level before you consider working with them. Otherwise, you're not going to really, you may not be calling to really the spirit that you need, or you may be inviting that spirit into a working that is not really in alignment with where they hold most influence, right? So learning about these things is so necessary, because otherwise you're not really properly, you're not really going to be able to do your best evocation. Okay, but a lot of people, I think, when they make these decisions, like that's kind of the extent of it, is they figure out, okay, this is the spirit I want, and this is why, and they don't do any additional preparation beyond that. And what I'm talking about now is that once you've chosen that spirit and you are drawing near to the time of your ritual, you need to actually step into the character of that spirit. If you're going to be doing a ritual tonight for a particular reason, throughout the day, as you've already kind of made the decision on who you want to evoke and what the logistics of the ritual itself might look like, prior to any of the work to actually be done, the magical work, the ritual work to be done, you need to get up that morning with the understanding that today I am going to live my life, and I'm going to take each step as though I were blank spirit, right? And that is, again, something that helps you to attune to that energy. It will also for sure put you on the radar of that spirit, because when anybody kind of utters our name in a situation like that, anybody kind of makes it clear, like, today I walk in the steps of, today I channel the power of, whoever that thing really is probably likely to take notice, right? I think we've all had that moment where we've heard somebody talking about us and we're like, excuse me, what did you say? Right? So So that's an important thing and a necessary component of the evocation, because that is in a sense already opening the door for that spirit to enter your work, and to really step into the room for you that night, right? Once we find ourselves in ritual, there are a lot of other physical things that need to happen, just like kind of the mechanics of ritual, right? And those will differ so much depending on the ritual you're doing, your particular practice, if there's a tradition that you are aligned to, right? But it is also good to do research our spirits, because within the mechanics of that ritual, and even though this might seem to be something that would be taking place after evocation, if we're calling a spirit into a room and that spirit is like considering, they're like, oh well, I mean, I don't really, I'm not sure I want to help you, but but I'm curious now, let's check it out, right? And that spirit, actually, they bring their presence into that space and they're kind of checking out what you've done. If you don't have items in your ritual setup, if you're not working with things that are also in alignment with that spirit, they may not stick around. They're like, why am I going to show up? Like if you are calling in, oh God, I'm trying to think of a particular situation here. So say you're calling in, a particular deity that is associated with springtime, right? But everything you've utilized in your work would have alignments or would be very visually aligned to, or connected to, like, say, winter, the depth of winter. That spring spirit, that intelligence is going to come through and is going to be like, there's no room for me in this space because of these pieces. Like you want me to feel at home here, but my style is, who knows, like, this, right? Like I want, my style is like old country home, and you are giving me contemporary urban apartment, right? I mean, so that's kind of it. Like we need to set the scene, right? We need to, if their favorite color is red, you better have some red in that space, right? That is also part of the evocation process. From there, as we are actually entering the act of evocation, we need to pay attention to how we're standing. I'm really bad about this. I personally, I slouch. My posture is for shit. Austin is always yelling at me. Well, Austin was or used to always yell at me. Um, still kind of mulling this over, right? Um, anyway, he used to yell at me because my posture is bad, and he's absolutely right. My posture is terrible. If lint or something on my hoodie, I should stop worrying about it and just record, right? Anyway, I very often have caught myself like stepping into ritual, stepping up before an altar for spell work, and I'm calling to a spirit, and I'm shoulders up around my ears, right? And I'm just like, I'm already looking defeated, right? And I think if you have ever done any kind of spiritual or particularly magical work, right, manifesting kind of work, whatever you may call it, right? If you go into that situation already feeling and looking as though you're defeated, right? Ugh, you're probably not likely to get the attention and the respect of some of the spirits that you might be considering evoking or calling in. So our posture is important. We need to stand upright, and we need to be like, put your chest out, like be proud, like take up some space, right? Particularly if you're the one doing the evocation and or leading the ritual, you need to take up space. You need to take up space, right? And so we need to stand proud, and we need to be on that. We need to consider again the nature of the spirit that we're calling in. If you want to do a working where you would want to evoke the very martial energy of, say, a god like Ares or Mars, right? A war deity, the Morrigan, who knows, right? You probably want to take like a warrior pose, like bring your arms up, and spread your legs a little bit. Like you can take up space, be that warrior, right? These are important things to consider. Okay. Because again, they are all part of the evocation, the process of evocation. Just like we need to show up and be proud in body, right, and strong in body, when we start to speak our evocation, when we actually are, the words are coming from our lips and we're saying them out loud, because we do not silently pray to our spirits and our deities, right? We do not silently pray, right? Go to church, right, if you need that shit, okay? We speak out loud, particularly when we are evoking, right? We are calling to this spirit. We are asking, not demanding. Never demand, ever, ever, ever. Okay. Even if it's written in the spell that you're reading, do not make demands of these spirits, right? If someone wants you to do them a favor and they say, you will do this, right? Or, excuse me, but would you please, like, which are you more likely to respond to, right? So never demand, okay? But we speak out loud and we speak in the affirmative, and we are again putting our power in our voice, right? So we're standing there, right? Power stance, right? Um, Speaking loud, clearly, right? And putting emotion and power behind our voice, right? Project, right? Which is tricky for a lot of people, particularly if you're not comfortable with ritual work, like these kinds of ritual workings. It can be difficult to kind of like get into that, like, oh, well, this isn't really who I am, or I'm embarrassed and there are other people here I don't know. I don't want to look like a fool, right? But if you're that concerned about looking like a fool, you've already wasted that whole time. That's the power and the thought that you're bringing into your ritual work. That's a wasted ritual. You're not going to accomplish anything. I keep doing this with my hands. I'm very animated with my hands today, waving my arms. Maybe I'll lift off here in a moment, right? Anyway, so put some power in your voice, okay? And when you say it, mean it, mean it. Okay, there are a lot of people. This is something that's really common in my area of the country in the U.S. Here is we have a lot of Mormons here, LDS Mormons. Not that they aren't everywhere; they're everywhere now. But we have a lot of Mormons here, and because of the way that their religion works, their spirit works in some of their doctrine, like they're actively encouraged to be quiet, to be milk toast, to be passive. Like they're encouraged to be meek in a sense. Not that there's anything wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being meek. There's nothing wrong with being to or quiet. I tend to be very passive and quiet when I'm not on the podcast. But I think because they grow up in that, they're taught that by their religion, that when they come out of that religion, it's hard to shake. It's difficult to let that go, right? So they will come into rituals and spells that we do here publicly, where people are out from the outside are invited in to work with the coven. And we'll be telling them, like, we're going to be repeating, we're going to be saying this evocation, or we're going to be speaking this incantation, and you must speak this as well. You are part of the group that is raising this power, and so you must also speak this. And everybody will be speaking the incantation, and the ex-Mormon, the whoever, whatever their issue is, right? They're like, and I call to the spirit of, and it's like, mousy, 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 you're already defeated. Why are you here? Right? So that's not going to work. That's not going to cut it. Okay. Not if you really want some of the really the kick-ass, the badass spirits that you want to work with. Ugh, no, put some power and some volume behind that voice. Okay. And mean what you say. Okay. Beyond that, it doesn't really matter exactly what you're saying. I'm assuming that you've prepared some sort of more formal evocation, like what you're saying, right? Like you had your script, right? Or who knows, maybe you're one of these people that kind of just likes to do things on the fly, and that's okay too, right? If you're one of these like impulsive, impetuous, spontaneous, that's the word. Austin used to always tell me that I was a very that I had a problem with spontaneity. And that's not it so much. I think for me, it's more an issue that I have a challenge, or I struggle with impetuousness, which is basically spontaneity with no real reason. Um, you know, oh God, it's an earthquake. I'm so sorry. I'm recording in a different space, as you have probably been able to tell already, and I'm unfamiliar with my I'm unfamiliar with where I am and spatially right now. I don't know. I don't even know why I'm going there. You don't care. Anyway, so these are important things. These are important components of evocation. And and one of the other things that I encourage people to do, and we talk about this a lot in other contexts, we've talked about this on the podcast, but as you are calling that spirit in, though of course you are showing the respect and acknowledging that this is a separate being, a separate entity, a separate intelligence, you also need to, in that moment, you need to somehow within yourself, you need to become that spirit as well. This is something I mentioned a few moments ago about how you kind of prepare yourself throughout the day. You kind of step into the power and the alignment of that spirit, whatever it may be, right? You need to kind of do the same thing as you're actively doing the evocation. You need to call in, who knows, Athena, right? And while you are calling Athena in, you need to also within yourself, you need to kind of conjure that like this is I am also Athena, right? And in doing that, what you do is you, on an energetic level, you help give that spirit another kind of ground, right? It's like a grounding or a connecting, a tether of some sort to be able to really fully manifest in that space the way you may wish them to, right? Um, One of the other important things that I want to kind of discuss around evocation, and this is one that I think it's tricky for some people as well, particularly people who are, as I mentioned a few moments ago, they like to kind of do their evocations, speak their incantations kind of more spontaneity, right? Or with more, they kind of just pull something out in the moment, right? And again, nothing wrong with that. There are people out there who are amazing performers and they can do that. They're very good in the moment. And then other people who, like me, for one, I'm like, I need a little more time to prepare this because I want to be very deliberate and intentional with what I say, right? I don't want there to be any opportunity for a stray word to slip in that may alter what I'm trying to create, whatever, right? Um, so as you're doing this, as you are either speaking, you're very carefully practiced in evocation, or you are improvising in the moment, right? Don't let your evocations go on over long, right? And every situation will be a bit different there, I think, depending on who you're trying to call in, right? Of course, right? But there are a lot of traditions out there that I've noticed over the years have these very long, these very elaborate, very formal evocations, and they're beautiful, and they're and they can be really really a nice addition to a ritual just to kind of capture the energy, right, or the feel, the ambiance of the ritual, right? But you don't need to go there if you are evoking a spirit and your evocation has run longer than like even like a couple of minutes. Like at that point, you're basically just repeating yourself. um, and again, a lot of that is going to be up to you, personal choice, right? Some people love the theater of a really very long evocation, but if you're creating your own evocations, do really pay attention to that, right? Because you're going to get to a point where it's like, I'm basically just repeating something I already said, right? Or this isn't, like you do have to kind of get to a point where you're like, okay, well, are we going to get done with the evocation so that we can actually start the ritual? You know, hello, right? Um, and there are a couple of reasons for that. One, the longer you go into evocation, if you've got other people working with you, you're going to lose people. Like I just said, you're going to have somebody in the room that maybe has like ADHD or whatever, and is like, what, what, when are we going to do the ritual? Like when are we going to do the thing, right? Um, so be careful about that. That's one of the reasons why you need to be mindful of that. Okay. The second thing really to consider is you need to remember that when we call these spirits in, right? When we call these spirits into a particular space, um, they have an energy. They have their own energy, and many spirits and intelligences that we want to connect with and work with regularly can actually uh, materialize on an energetic level. They can come into that space, and their energy can be not the best for us, right? If any of you have ever had a chance, I mentioned her a few moments back in talking about war goddesses, but the Morrigan, who is on my brain because it's kind of her time of year, and a lot of people have been having conversations about her recently. And I'm not a Morrigan person, but I can respect her for who and what she is as an amazing goddess, right? I don't work with her personally, but she's lovely, right? But I gotta say that she'll beat me up. Um, but if you're gonna call in the Morrigan, and you're calling in particularly one of her more warlike aspects, you may find that the longer she's in that space, that you and anyone else in that space starts to kind of feel that build of adrenaline, right? Which for the purpose of spell work and ritual is not necessarily a bad thing to a point, right? But deities like the Morrigan, because they have such a strong warlike energy and they have that warrior kind of a vibe, kind of like some people would explain it as almost like a caged tiger, right? Like they're just getting ready to do something, right? That over time that can start to manifest in anxiety. People can start to have odd physical sensations, right, in their body, or in connection to, or in kind of channeling and working through the feel of like warrior kinds of energy, right? So it's something that you need to consider, right? And it's not that that's necessarily harmful, but I also don't know that that's really kind of the vibe that you want, right? So, beyond that, there are other spirits that we can call in, certain goetic spirits, elemental spirits, even angelic spirits that can have energies that really are just not conducive to our exposure for prolonged periods of time, right? Those energies are just, well, they are, but they are, right? But it's one of those kinds of things. Like if you think about it, that, and I've made this comparison on the podcast before as well, right? That the closer you get to a nuclear plant that has had a meltdown, right? Like, God forbid, right? But like say like in Japan in recent years, so many years ago, Chernobyl, right? That the closer you get to that space, the more you are being exposed to radiation that could be harmful. The longer you are there, the more likely you're going to have trouble or issues around radiation poisoning, right? And it is much the same with certain spirits that we can connect with, right? You really probably don't want to stay within the same room or the same space as an angel for prolonged periods of time, because angels have an energy that can cause very weird reactions in us, like up to and including very prolonged and serious terminal illnesses. So be mindful of that, right? Because, and getting back to the initial thing is like you don't want overly long evocation, because you need to be able to call the spirit in and observe the ritual, do what you need to do, take care of the spell work that needs to be done, and then probably very quickly thereafter send that spirit back to where they came from, right? So just again, things to consider, right? Um, those of you maybe who have been listening up to this point, you might be like, well, I don't really do formal evocation in my work. That would be common, I would think, for maybe secular kinds of practitioners or atheistic practitioners, right? And that's okay, but even then, I want to say, even if you're not calling in another spirit, a separate intelligence or being, some component of you is still probably amping up in some way, right? And in that situation, what I would say is, if you're not familiar or you don't have or choose to work with other separate intelligences and spirits, I would still encourage you to do some sort of more formal evocation process as a part of your work, mainly because that also serves to get you into the right place. That serves you as well as that it helps to, again, kind of like this is kind of where I need to be and who I need to be. Beyond that, a lot of people, I think, as they are working through issues of insecurity or imposter syndrome, that pops up a lot around ritual work and being actually in charge of a ritual or spell, right? A lot of times those people really can use a little bit of a pep talk. And there is nothing wrong with you as you are stepping forward to do your evocation and ritual or spell work, right? To, instead of calling in goddess, god, whoever, right? There's nothing wrong with you standing there, right? And issuing an evocation somewhat along the lines of like, I am a powerful witch. I have come into this space at this point, this time, whatever, for this purpose, and this is what shall be in response to the work that I do. I am, and to maybe let that evocation be a little bit of again, a kind of like a kudo or a pep talk for you as you are raising your energy and really preparing to then move into what you need to do mechanically for that working, right? Evocation is really powerful, and it's powerful in the extent that it isn't just about the other spirit. It's a lot of it is about us, right? And does that mean we need to do evocations for everything? Absolutely not. No, I don't. And most of the practitioners that I know, they don't either. And I know a lot of practitioners. But it's something that's to do with us as well, and the way that we prepare ourselves for that work. Right? So things to consider, right? That's pretty much it. This is going to be a short episode, just because I again am still not. I'm still flying solo, with the exception of our lovely goddesses on the shelf behind me. Yes, we will see what the future holds for my prodigal co-host. Anyway, I wanted to talk a little bit about some cool stuff that's coming up in the shop. If you are in the Utah area, the northern Utah area, and you're okay making a little bit of a drive, we have this Friday evening at 6 p.m. We have the fire scrying rite. This is actually a ritual process. Okay, a lot of people have called inquiring about the fire scrying class. And just to be clear, we're not teaching you how to fire scry. Okay, there'll be a little bit of informational stuff, and instructional stuff at the start of the rite, just so everybody's kind of clear on what we're doing. Okay, but this is actually like, we're being practical. We are going to be reading fire. Okay, so that's this Friday. at 6 p.m. Okay. Plan on, if you're able to join us or you want to join us, call the shop and get registered, because if you don't register, you can't come. Okay. And we will give you some additional information over the time that you call, and then come and plan on at least an hour and be ready to read some fire. Okay. We also have coming up this weekend, and it's this coming Sunday, which I believe is the 8th. I think the 8th. Yes. In the afternoon, don't get me wrong, I think it's at 5 p.m. So late afternoon, we have Wendy's broom making class. This is such a fun class, and she only does this about once a year. So again, if you're in the Utah area, and I know so many of you are not, and I'm so sorry, I'm not trying to torture you with this information, I promise. But she will be doing her next broom making class, and the people that come to that class, like you're going to be making a broom, and you get to take that broom home with you. And she provides the majority of the material. It's a little more of an expensive class, right? But I think to come in to get the instruction, to get the experience, to get Wendy's expertise, and to be able to make a wonderful broom for yourself, right? And brooms are such amazing magical items. My God, brooms can do so much for us magically, and energetically, beyond just keeping our floors clean, right? Anyway, but all of that, and then you get to make a broom where all the stuff is provided, and you get to take that home with you. Like I think she's charging $80 for that, which is a steal at that price. That is a steal for all of that you were getting. Okay, so those things are coming up. We also have really cool stuff happening here at the shop. Please share the podcast, right? That gives us the ability to reach more people, right? Send us your comments, send us your questions. Please send us your questions. We love to answer those things, and we love to help you figure things out, right? Beyond that, as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, you're teaching us, which is wonderful, right? That's going to be it for this episode. Okay, so thank you so much for spending the last few minutes with me. Right, I will let you get back onto your day, your evening, whatever's going on for you. Right, and as always, thank you so much for supporting the podcast. Bye.